we'll go ahead and get started to make sure that we can get everything packed into our agenda today. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Community Marriage Initiative Fund's second training event. My name is Katie Ray, and I'm with Marriage Initiative, and I work closely with all of our wonderful partner cities around the U.S. who are working diligently to build a community marriage initiative in their city. And thank all of you for joining us here today. As always, it is truly a joy to be able to see everyone come together. So last month, we were focusing on the fundamentals of effective marriage ministries, and we heard from our friends at the Central Arkansas Marriage Initiative, or CAMI, where they spoke on ways to approach pastors and church leaders. And we also heard from our friend Jerry Angelo in Springfield, Missouri, where he spoke about making connections and relationships in the broader context and community. And this month, we are planning to switch gears just a bit and turn our focus to ways to support the growth of marriage ministries in churches, and how and why that supportive role is so important for pastors as well as for the church. But before we get started with our speakers, I wanted to welcome Miss Christa Clark, who is helping to build a community marriage initiative in Tacoma, Washington. And Christa is going to open us up in prayer. So Christa, whenever you're ready.
Lord, thank you so much for this time to be together. I'm so excited to hear from Ted Lowe. He's one of our favorites. Thank you for literally just getting to see the faces and read the names of people all across the United States who you have put a fire in each of us to want to help marriage and families. And it's so cool to know that we're not alone in a culture that really is just seems to be resisting you. And traditional families, thank you, Lord, that this confirmation here is that this is from you. You are still here. You are still uniting people. And I'm just so grateful that we can be here freely. We don't have to hide. And the cool opportunity to learn from Ted Lowe. And thank you so much for Katie Ray and Carl and the whole SAMI team that has really cared to bring us all together, to invest in us, to train us. What a gift. Thank you so much for this time. We love you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Christa. Okay, so first on our agenda for today, we have, let's see, oh, yes, I did. Okay. We have Dave and Cheryl Belden, and Dave and Cheryl first became a mentor couple nearly 15 years ago, where they began volunteering to teach communication curriculum called Mastering the Mysteries of Love. And now fast forward years later, they now have written their own communication class curriculum entitled Marriage Works. So today they continue to teach and model and coach couples in learning new communication skills. And they also meet with local church pastors and church leadership to really lay out a plan for marriage ministries and churches. And today they will be touching on a simple way to solve an immediate problem. And you'll soon hear that this is an issue that probably many of us are facing in the marriage community. So I will turn it over to Dave and Cheryl. So whenever you guys are ready.
Well, thank you. We appreciate this opportunity. Just as the prayer goes, we so appreciate being able to see everybody here, and so excited to see so many people with a heart and passion for marriage. So this is really cool. And for us to be able to share today, we really appreciate that. So I'm Dave and my wife, Cheryl. We got started in the ministry, as you were sharing, about 15, 16 years ago with the Healthy Marriage Coalition that Ron and Joan McLean had started. And Ron's a counselor and learned that his counseling, that he thought a lot of people, if they would just be mentors, if he could train some mentors, it would take the load off. And so he started training a lot of mentors. And so when we got involved with them, we were trained as a mentor first. And then as we got involved in that, he actually had trained over 200 mentors in our city. And the issue then came up is we were trained, but the church really wasn't using us. And so how can we get involved? And we learned we could do more through the Healthy Marriage Coalition. And that's when we started doing the classes, the communication skills. Why don't you tell them a little about what the skills are?
Okay, so these are just basic communication skills, such as like active listening and the way to express yourself, what could trigger your partner, identifying those kinds of things, learning their love languages. So these are basic skills that we teach in our Marriage Works class.
And we teach them because they were helpful to us. We thought we had a good marriage. Bottom line, I was a stonewaller. I did not express myself. Cheryl, what would you say about listening?
I wasn't a very good listener.
She was a great expresser.
Yes.
So
yes.
we learned these tools and they helped us, and we wanted to pass those on. And so through that, we learned that we could go to churches, kind of explain what we do, how we do that. I think our curriculum isn't as important as the model that we use in teaching it. Our model is that we will teach a skill, but then we do it. We model it. We let the class see what the skill looks like. There's so much information education-wise, but it's the application part. So when we model the skill, they get to see it, and then in class, they do it. And we actually have coaches that help them do the skill. And then we go over the bullet points of the skill. So it's really, I think modeling is what, at the end of every class, we talk about, ask them what they learn. It's always the modeling that does that. So our plan probably is mostly modeling the skill so they can see it and then they can practice it. So that's primarily what we do, is we teach that class. But along with that, we help the churches in that we do retreats. We do events. You want to talk about some of the events that we do?
Yeah, so we might have a conference for them, like on a Friday, Saturday, get them excited about learning some skills so that they will want to attend our 6-week class. We have like a couples cafe where couples can come for an evening, like a date night. And we'll have like some testimonies and we always teach a skill, you know, we got them there. And so we want to teach them something so they can walk away with something. We also have couples Olympics where we'll bring some really fun games into a church for like a Saturday and just get their couples excited about working together with other couples.
A lot of couples, it seems like today, don't do anything together anymore. And so to have events like that, it helps them connect. The couples Olympics is just really fun because it's probably something they've never done before. And they talk about, you know, anytime a couple will do something they've never done before, it helps them bond closer. So that's been pretty interesting and a fun thing. And they talk about it for a long time after that.
So those are some of the things that we do. Katie gave us a question here. It says, if a pastor comes to you and mentions that they are experiencing challenges with married couples and they're overwhelmed, how would you respond?
And that happens often. I think for us, just to even say that if a pastor comes to do that, there's already some type of relationship we have with them for them to kind of be so open and honest. And so the first thing I think we would do is that we would talk to them with some empathy and trying to understand a little bit where they're coming from. You know, for a pastor to be able to share that, you know, that's a struggle, and to give them an opportunity to talk a little bit through that is, you know, even to ask them a question is, well, when you got into the ministry, did you think this is something you're going to be doing as far as counseling? I would say a majority of the pastors, you know, their heart and their passion is for teaching, is for the message, and all of a sudden, all their time gets taken dealing with issues, and you know, we come alongside, and yes, counseling marriage couples is hard. It's time consuming. It's also very emotionally draining, and so to let them understand that we know where they're coming from would be our first step. Fortunately for us and our ministry, Ron is a counselor, and so short term we would say, you know, we can offer some help with some of the counseling short term, as far as if Ron can't help your couples, he can certainly get them to someone that can. We could refer them to other counselors, but Mostly pastors, that's a pretty hard thing to do unless they really trust you, because the counselors out there could be all over the place. And so again, it's the relationship that we have. So we feel real fortunate that Ron takes care of that for us. But that's short term. So long term, we talk more about, would you be interested in maybe training some of your lay people in to be able to help your couples, so you could spend your time doing what God has called you to do as far as the preaching and the teaching and things like that. So you want to talk a little bit about what that would look like?
Yeah, so we would tell them a little bit about our Marriage Works class and the skills that we can teach their couples. And so as if they agree to that, we also encourage them to come, if they're married, and bring their wife and any leaders in the church, because oftentimes if the leaders come, a lot of other couples will come in their church. We've had them come where, like 2 or 3 only came and the pastor didn't even come. And that just doesn't show a lot of support for what we're doing or what they believe for marriage. And so we really encourage the pastor to come and their other leaders too. And then after they, while we're doing the Marriage Works class, we're asking the pastor to maybe identify some lead couples in his church. We're also looking for couples who look like they have a passion for it, that are really catching on to what, the skills are, and identifying them. And then afterwards, we can offer to take them through Preparing Rich, which is a long time ministry. And it's an online assessment that they take to identify different strengths and growth areas in their relationships. And so we can take those couples through Preparing Rich. It's usually like about a 5 or 6 week thing, just us and them, like a 2-on-2 thing. And then train them, the ones who want to be trained, and then they can take other couples through that in their church too. And so those are some of the resources that we tell the pastor about.
So really what we're hoping to do is to give pastor short-term and also long-term plans, and to be able to look at the big picture, to train the lay people will lighten their load so they don't have to do it as much. And so that's part of it. The other part is, isn't it better to train your congregation so they don't have those problems? And so to get them into some of that teaching and training is really helpful. And so typically a pastor can see that. And again, we invite them in and say, how, does that sound like that would be helpful to you? And we go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for your wisdom and for sharing your experience with us. And before we move on to our next speaker, I actually wanted to keep Dave and Cheryl around for just a bit, because I wanted to talk about the upcoming NARMI Summit, which will be in Salt Lake City this year. And many of you are probably familiar with NARMI, which stands for the National Association for Relationship and Marriage Education, or NARMI. But for those of you who are just hearing about it for the first time, each year NARMI hosts an annual summit which focuses on equipping those leading the way for healthy relationship development and family formation, really with the knowledge and strategies to be most effective in the workplace and in the community, which really relates to all of you here today. And Dave and Cheryl have been to NARMI in the past and will be attending this year. So Dave and Cheryl, would you guys mind just, touching on your experience at NARMI and what you learned during your time there and how you are able to apply it to your work once you are back home in Fresno?
I think one of the biggest things is, we kind of feel like we're lone wolves all by ourselves in the marriage ministry. In this area, there's very few things like this. Even to see all the people on the screen today is just amazing. But when we went to NARMI, all of a sudden we see a lot of like-minded people and very encouraged to be able to interact with them and see what's going on today.
Yeah. They bring in great speakers for the plenaries, and they come with like current research findings and information, and it helps us to stay relevant, for the couples that we're working with, because, we're getting older and we don't know all the stuff going on, how the younger people, what's happening in the trends and things like that. And so they give us ideas and help us to just kind of stay current with that. There's a lot of different workshops with so many different topics. And so you can go to the ones that you're interested in. Oftentimes Dave and I split up, and so we don't go to the same ones, and then we can share what we saw so that we can take in a lot of information.
And the stuff that we learned, we got to take back to churches that we were working with.
Yeah.
That was extremely helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Like I went to a marketing one on how to, market our ministry. And we've been to ones on blended families. We're not a blended family. And so we're always looking for, ways to be able to reach those couples, different couples that are, different culture than us, and the way that their culture might, relate to different topics in marriage. And the networking is great, like Dave said too. Like they plan networking activities for you, which are really kind of fun. Sometimes there's games and just ways to get to know other couples, and also just sitting down at lunchtime, and just like, where are you from? What are you doing? How are you doing that? Can we have your email address? What kind of resources do you have? Just coming home with all those resources, we get like really recharged too, like really motivated when we come home to like, we're ready to get started again for the fall. And so we just really enjoy it. It's great. We've been to the one in Anaheim, and we went to the one in Denver, and they were great.
It was wonderful. It's wonderful. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And it sounds like there's quite a few of us in the room here who will be at NARMI. I think Paul asked who's going to be there. And so it looks like a few people have spoke up. So I definitely encourage you to find each other and, be able to hug and shake hands and meet one another in person. And, that would be wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, Dave and Cheryl. We appreciate it. And I have to say, Dave and Cheryl, we, had an unexpected event yesterday happened. And so we had to change up our agenda. And I reached out to Dave and Cheryl just really yesterday evening and asked them to speak. And so thank you guys for, preparing this presentation and just with such little time. We appreciate you guys. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will now invite Mr. Dennis Stoica to speak with us. And as most of you know, Dennis is the founder and one of the funders of the CMI Fund and one of our most respected leaders in the relationship and marriage education field. And today, Dennis will be speaking on vision, skills, and support. So Dennis, whenever you're ready. I think you're still muted, Dennis. We can't hear you.
Thank you. And now that you give me the permission to speak, thank you. Could I share my screen so people can see my slides, please?
Yes, you should be able to.
I should be perfect. Thank you. Share. Thank you from beginning. Super, great. All right. So first of all, kind of a disclaimer. I'm going to be talking quickly, so they've asked me to speak for 10 minutes, so I'm setting my timer for 10 minutes, and I'll be speaking quickly. I'm pulling material here that actually came from a 90-minute, some of you saw a 37-minute version of this that was done at the NARMI plenary from 2018. I also did a 90-minute version, actually more in depth, that I did at the NACFLM conference of 2019. That's National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers. And I would encourage you, if this is an area of interest to you, and I hope it will be, that I'll be happy to share that entire 90-minute presentation. It goes more in depth, and I think it'd be a good use of your time. Also, would encourage each of the current grantees, CMI grantees, to take advantage of the microfund that's offered to you on going to the NARMI conference. It is very much worthwhile. And just confirming, can everybody see my screen? Somebody say yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. So I'll be quick. So the title is talking about vision, skills, and support. And I believe most of you have probably watched the NARMI presentation. And so some of this will be from there. And what I say is that to be most effective, marriage ministry should be balanced across the three areas of vision, skills, and support. I want to talk a little bit about what each of these are. Then I want to talk about, like, well, what happens if it's unbalanced, in an unbalanced environment, and then share results of what's possible in a balanced environment. So Vision, skill, support. Let's talk about what each of those are. So what vision is basically God's plan and teachings for marriage. You'll remember from Proverbs is without vision, the people will perish. So examples of things of vision, again, God's plan and teaching for marriage. It's themes like love one another, unconditional love, marriage is a sacrament, the indissolubility of marriage, covenant versus contract, mutual submission in a marriage, the importance of forgiveness, leaving and cleaving. So these are all themes that are very biblically based. And so it's important that in a marriage ministry that we lead with the scripture. And if you look at the triangle that I use, I put vision on the bottom. That's the base is vision. Very important. The next is skills. The skills is how to love one another. And many of you heard me say that I believe the core message of the gospel is love God and love one another. And what Marriage Ministries does, in particular the skills part, is it operationalizes that by teaching how to love one another. And what this slide shows is actually lists of like 30 different types of skills that are taught in various marriage education programs. Now, you don't have to worry about writing them all down, because right before I started, I sent an email to Katie and Carl with copies of the handouts of this presentation. I will inviting them to please distribute this to you so that you'll have them. But I want to walk through just a couple as an example. So these are all in the category of how to do these things, like how to speak effectively in a way that will increase the chances of being listened to, how to listen effectively in a way that shows your spouse that you truly understand them, how to show your spouse how specifically you appreciate them. Hold on, so my light just went off, so give me a sec so I can see if I can turn it back on.
I think Dennis is at a hotel, which is why he may be in a room where the light just automatically went off without movement.
Yeah, and
we could still see you, Dennis. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Sorry about that. I just didn't anticipate that. So I'll need another minute added to my time. Sorry about that. Now, I want to be clear though, when you're talking about skills, it's not about talking about the skills. It really is teaching and training people how to make the behavior change. When I teach a course, I start by saying, people, I'm here to change your lives. I'm here to change your behavior. I'm here to change the way you communicate. And a line I frequently say is, I'm not interested in turning out better educated non-communicators. So it's not about theory, it's about practice. And as Dave mentioned in his beginning is, you've got to model it, then you've got to give them a chance to practice. And in fact, I lay out a 6-step model for teaching skills. And what I would encourage you is to look at the way you quote unquote teach skills, because I've had a lot of people in this field say, oh, I teach skills. Well, what do you mean? Well, we do paper and pencil exercises. No, that means you're presenting theory. So I encourage you to look at this 6-step model and then map what you're doing in these areas of communication against this. And again, in the 90-minute NACFLM plenary, you'll have a chance to actually see it laid out. So I see there's really 6 steps to teaching a skill. And by the way, this isn't just in teaching communication. This is how any skill is taught in really the world. So the first is you present the theory behind the skill. The second is you do provide step-by-step instructions on how it should be done. The third, as Dave pointed out, you demonstrate, you model the skill. Step 4 is you typically process the demo, like, did that make sense? Do you have any questions about what you saw? The 5th is the most important, which is to have the participants actually practice the skill. Notice the hyphen. Then the instructor or a coach observes and gives feedback to what they see. And the 6 is you process the practice. It's an additional teaching opportunity. And what I encourage you to say, what I believe is this is the optimal way to be teaching skills. And if you're not doing all 6 steps, you may be talking about skills, you may not be actually teaching people how to do the skills. So we did vision, we did skills, now let's look at support. Support, here's examples of support. It could be mentor or sponsor couples. And you heard Dave mention mentor couples. Skills coaching in class, they could be follow-up, they could be phone. Support in a church could be an initial contact for crisis couples. It could be having somebody that has knowledge of other resources that are available. It could be providing aftercare after the program's over. It could be providing small groups to people in a marriage ministry. And many times it's the accompaniment of it. And so, as I mentioned, to be most effective, marriage ministry should be balanced across the 3. You can look at it as vision provides the inspiration and the motivation. The skills provides the how-to. That's the roadmap, the instructions. Support provides the encouragement to make sure that it's done and done properly. And so a legitimate question would be to say, well, what happens in an unbalanced environment? Like what happens if you have only one of the dimensions? And then I'll go on to talk about what if you have 2 of the dimensions. And so in the first case, if you only have vision, your unintended consequence is likely to be frustration and discouragement, because couples will say, well, I can't live up to that ideal. On the other hand, if you're in a setting where you only teach skills without vision or support, trust me, over the long haul, skills will not be used because there's not motivation to use them that would be provided by the vision, and there's no support to use them that would be provided by no encouragement, which would be provided by the sport. On the other hand, if you're only providing the support, like you get together in a group setting and you're just talking, that will likely lead to what I call is unhappy endurance, where the couples may stick together for a long time, but they won't be happy. Their marriage will not be thriving. That's not a long-term solution. So now let's look to see what happens if you do 2 out of the 3 dimensions. So if you just provide vision and skills without support, well, those couples will start strong after the class, but then it will fade because they won't have the follow through that the ongoing support and encouragement will provide. On the other hand, if you just provide the vision and the support without the skills, you'll end up back in unhappy endurance. Now, these couples, they may stay together for a long time. They may white knuckle it through their marriage, but their marriage won't be happy. That's not the type of marriage that God created. On the other hand, if you just have skills and support without the vision, that's really hard to maintain over the long term. As I quoted Proverbs 20:19, where there is no vision, the people perish. And why that becomes hard is, so when there's temptation, you need the vision to see you through. When you get discouraged, even with encouragement, you want to know, okay, God is calling to me to that. So in other words, you really need all 3 dimensions. And so now we ask the question is, what is possible when we combine vision, skills, and support? And I want to show the results of a case study that was done in Northwest Florida to military couples. And this is a sample size of over 1,500 couples that took a program called Adventures in Marriage that was implemented with all 3 of vision, skills, and support. And so we're going to show slides for 8 questions, but I'm going to take a minute on the first couple to see how it works. So as you see the scale at the bottom, they ask questions and they're invited to answer. If it's like dark red or rust color, that shows it strongly disagree. Lighter red is somewhat disagree. Yellow is neither agree nor disagree. Light green is somewhat agree, and the dark green is strongly agree. And so one way to look at it is so here's the first question that says, my spouse or partner and I have the knowledge and skills to communicate well. On each of the slides, the top bar represents the pretest. So what happens when they started the class, and the lower bar represents the post test at the end of the class. So you can see at the beginning of the class, right around 40% of the couples either strongly disagreed or somewhat disagreed with the frame of that my spouse and partner and I have the knowledge and skills to communicate well. But at the end of the class, only 2 or 3% agreed with that. Disagreed. Some are disagreed. And look at it, 95% of the couples at the end of this weekend-long class, it really only is 8 hours long, either agreed or strongly agreed with this sentiment that we have the knowledge and skills to communicate well. The next question is, I am confident in our ability to resolve conflicts in a healthy way. This is even more dramatic, where at the coming in, you had 45% of the couple says, you know what? We're not confident in our ability to resolve conflicts in a healthy way. But at the end of the class, probably around 93% of the couples now felt confident in our ability to resolve conflicts in a healthy way. And we asked really 8 different questions along those lines. The first 2 we've gone over. The next one is, my spouse listens. Is it safe emotionally for me to confide? Do I have empathy? Does my spouse have empathy? The next one is rating their marriage on a scale of 1 to 10, which we then move down to a 1 to 5 scale, and whether or not we're headed for divorce. Without getting caught in the details on each, the big picture on this is, on all 8 of these questions, you had dramatic swings away from red to green. And that really shows these are the kind of results you can deliver in your programs, in your ministries, if you have a program and an implementation that is well balanced between vision, skills, and support. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dennis. And as Dennis mentioned, I will be sure to send this out to everyone following the event so that you can take a closer look to the presentation. Thank you again, Dennis. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Okay, next up we have Ted Lowe, and some of you may be familiar with Ted. Ted is the director of Married People, which I will provide a link to you all to his website in just a bit. And Ted is also a speaker and author of 2 books, Married People, How Your Church Can Build Marriages That Last, and Your Best Us, Marriage is Easier Than You Think. And Ted is also a dear friend of Sammy. I know that him and Carl I've known each other for many years. Unfortunately, Ted is not here with us today in person, but he was so generous to pre-record his presentation for us so that we could play it during our training event here today. And Ted will be speaking on the state of marriage and what the church can do. So let me pull up his video and we will hear what Ted has to say.
And Katie, I love Ted is so funny on the back end and the front end. I love the way he handles awkward moments. And
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay, let me just make sure okay. Okay, can you guys see the video that I have pulled up? It's a black
Yes.
screen. Yes, okay, good deal. I will go ahead and play it.
hey, Katie, it's not yet appearing. Are you aware of that?
Oh, are you guys not watching? Are you guys not able to see it on? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm watching it on my end. Okay. Let me try one more thing. Hold on one second. Let's see.
Did you click the 2 radio buttons?
Let's see.
Katie, it looks like all we can see is your whiteboard.
Do you guys still not see the video, that the black video
Mm-mm.
that's up? Okay.
We
Carl,
just
do
see
you
your
Oh,
whiteboard and little marks that you're making.
Okay. Carl, do you want to try and let me give you the ability to share, Carl?
Okay,
Um,
very good.
Okay, you should be able to share now, Carl. My apologies.
Okay. All right, can you see it now, Katie?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you still see it, Katie?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Carl, we can see it, we can't hear it.
right, it's,
Okay.
let's see. Let me move this. Okay, there we go. How's that?
That looks good.
Hi, guys. I'm excited to be with you this morning. I am so excited to hear what Sammy's doing. Sammy, for 10, 15 years, has done an incredible thing in San Antonio area. And I've said to Carl before that this thing needs to go global. It is great to see that it is going nationwide. And I think pouring into marriages right now in your city has never been more important. And yes, there's some challenges and we're going to talk about those, but just know what you're doing is so important. And I just want to thank you personally for what it's worth. Thank you for doing it. I've been pouring into marriages since 2001. I was director of married life at North Point Church for almost 10 years and been overseeing an organization called marriedpeople.org for the last 12 years. And so marriage, for whatever reason, is my thing. So when I see fellow champions, I just want to praise you and thank you for doing what you do. And again, to Carl and all the team at Sammy, I am so glad that God is expanding your vision beyond Texas and into the nation. So excited about that. So I'm going to be my own tech crew here, and so bear with me, but here we go. There we go. We're talking a little bit about the state of the marriage and what in the world the church can do about it. But I think to help us start to think about that and process that, I think it's really important, especially for our conversation here today, is the state of marriage ministry and where it is. You know, marriage ministry, to use Stephen Covey's time management matrix that some of you have seen before, it lives in the quadrant, unfortunately. This is important, but it's not urgent. I mean, no pastor, no church leader, no believer is going to say that marriage is not important to the church, to children, to faith. Nobody argues that. But on a practical sense, what ends up happening from a marriage ministry sense, it tends to, I feel like, and I've seen after doing this for a really long time, I see that marriage ministry lives in this, but it's not urgent quadrant. And we did a lot of work over the last 10, 15 years to really pull them into this quadrant. This is important, but urgent. But when COVID hit, I feel like even churches that were really rocking and rolling on this thing, they really pulled back and put it into this quadrant. And here's the thing, I understand it. I really do. And I have a lot of empathy for church leaders. I can't imagine right now what they're having to go through, process and figure out. You know, some of them are just trying to keep the lights on. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury to wait until everything goes back to normal to start pouring into marriages. And I don't have to convince you guys of this, but we don't have the luxury to do that right now, do we? We don't have the luxury to wait. And I think the thing that we can all agree on, and the thing that puts all of us that are on this call, at least on the same page as this, is that marriage ministry needs to live in this quadrant. This is important and this is urgent. And what we found about in terms of the state of marriage and where it is that COVID was not neutral with couples. at all. It moves them in one direction or the other. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And I started wondering, like, why is that the case? Why did COVID have such an impact on people's marriages? And I think I was reading through Charles Duhigg's book. I love it. It's called The Power of Habit. I've read it too many times, but I just think there's so much to be said there. But he makes a statement that I think is telling to what we're talking about. It says, habits become flexible when things become emotional. Habits become flexible when things become emotional. And I think the thing we can all agree on is that things have become very emotional. You know, COVID has been a very emotional thing. You know, everything on the news and people losing loved ones, it's been a very emotional time. So it's moved people one direction or the other. I mean, we've all heard it, you know, that marriages, you know, they don't live in neutral. They're either in drive or reverse. Well, I think that's true. And that's what the pandemic has shown to be true. 38% of marriages are struggling more than they were prior to COVID. So that's not shocking there, right? We get it. And so 38% saying this has had a negative impact on our marriage. I think the stat is like 42% of them, it's been because of finances. And so there's just a lot of pain there. And so we think about this as 1 in 3 married couples in your church or community are struggling. And Carl will tell you, you'll be hard pressed to find a more optimistic person than me. But wow, that's just a reality that we've got to wrap our arms around and say, whoa, 1 in 3 married couples are hurting in our church and community. But here's the good news, and we all need that right now, right? 58% of marriages say they're stronger. 58% of marriage say that they're stronger, that they're doing better than ever. And we can see that. Like one of the studies was talking about how when things get scary, when things start to struggle, like after the Great Recession and even after 9/11, is that people see each other as security more than they did before. That they start having priorities more. Some of them, they start drawing towards each other instead of pushing away from each other. So that's an important thing to note, and really good news for us. The company I work for is called Orange, and we just did a study on parenting to see where parents are, like what are they struggling with, what's going on with them. And Christa Ivy, who's president of Orange, she called me and she said, whoa, I'm blown away at the impact that parenting has on marriage. And I said, Kristen, I've been telling you that for a long time. She goes, I know, but this study is blowing me away. Because when they ask parents, where's the #1 place that you go to when you need parental support? When you're struggling with a kid and you want parental support, where's the #1 place that you go? The #1 place that they went was to a spouse or a partner. The #1 place that they would go is to a spouse or a partner. And you think about the numbers on that. If there's a 50% of them are divorced, they're even going to an ex-spouse or partner. 87% of them. So wouldn't we want to do everything in the world, if we just care about kids, to pour into the people's relationship they're caring for those kids? What's the most helpful resource? We asked parents, what's the most helpful resource for helping you raise your kids with faith? And we got stable family and a strong marriage. So I feel like, wow, these people are telling us what we're, as churches, maybe aren't potentially living out. They're saying, hey, the #1 thing we need is to pour into family and to marriages. And Kristen said this to me. She said, investing in strong marriages is the smartest way to give kids a better future. And I just think that's true. I mean, I think is there anything more important that we can continue to do than to pour into marriages to help kids? This is all stuff that you know, but I just think it's helpful, hopefully, for us to think about again. So how do we leverage this big thing that's happened to make big thinking happen in our church? This big old thing called the pandemic happened, continues to happen. How do we leverage it to make big things happen? Well, when I start getting overwhelmed in marriage ministry and I see all the sad stats, I always go back to Colossians 2:2. And this was the verse that started me in marriage ministry. My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding in order that they may know the mystery named in Christ. And I saw this, I've been married for 6 years, doing marriage ministry, had no clue what I was doing, but I landed on this verse and I thought, this is it. We want people to be encouraged in heart and united in love. Like at the end of what we're pouring into them, like if we're giving them a resource or however we're mentoring or whatever that is, we want them to be encouraged in heart and united in love. So on the basis of that we kind of dive in and go, how can we help? How does the church encourage married couples' hearts and unite them in love? I think to get really, really practical for a few minutes is, number one, we got to told you technical difficulties is actually nothing to do with technical things, just my brain. Create a response plan for hurting couples. When someone calls the church, and I think this is so helpful to ask church leaders, when someone calls the church and says we're hurting in our marriage, what is the plan? It's not reactionary. What is our plan? Because for a lot of churches, there is no plan. So it becomes very reactionary. And what happens is the pastor stops everything he or she is doing, and they stop to meet with this couple. Now, I think that's noble. I just don't think it's scalable. And I might even go so far as to say, I don't even think it's wise that's the plan. Because the pastor is stopping everything else, everything to serve this one couple, which is great. This is great. But is there a better plan? Is there something where we can hook people up with mentor couples, which I think you guys are going to talk about, where we can find counselors in the area, we can find coaches, so that when someone calls, we know the plan. Now, here's the other part of this. I think everybody in the church needs to know what that plan is. Because if someone says that their neighbor says, hey, I know you go to church, I know you go to church down the road, First Baptist down the road church, I know you go there. What do you guys have for marriage? I think we need to equip them with the answer. They need to have a quick answer because they become the advocates. They become the bridge for people back into church. So I think we've got to create a response plan. Know what that is instead of being so reactionary. The second part is we got to create a strategy for the rest. I feel like churches, they will spend all their time and their resources reacting to couples. And I, for the last 15 years, have been saying, hey, we got to get proactive. We've got to have a strategy to help people from getting in a crisis in the first place. So what does that strategy look like? I'm going to give you the married people strategy, which is our organization strategy. It doesn't have to be our strategy. You may come up with one that's 10 times better. It may work better. Something else may work totally better for your church. But I'm going to give you our strategy just for example's sake. And I think there's some things hopefully that we can take away from that. The first part of the larger group experiences. And what do I mean by that? When is the time that you have couples all together? When's that time? Is it Sunday morning? That's a larger group experience. Is it a date night? That's a larger group experience. A retreat? That's a larger group experience. Is that you want to have something set that we are talking about marriage when we're all together, or at least when married couples are all together. One of the things that I love to do, I do love retreats, but I also love date nights. I think they become more cost effective. I think they become more time effective for people. More people can come because of them. This is a church that's close to us that's right down the road. It's called Grace Chapel. And they just had a fun date night where they, well, first of all, they had trail mix. I don't need to go past that because trail mix is important. The couples are sitting around tables. You can tell that the church, pulled out all the stops. They did kind of a camping thing. They did a really fun thing. They brought couples up on stage and just played a game with them. They used the pastor's paddleboard as decoration, pulled out Christmas trees to make it look like a camping scene. It was very fun. This is my friend Rocky, and you can see how great a name is Rocky. I get Ted, and he gets Rocky. I'm a little bitter, but how much fun did that? This night was so much fun. And they just brought them together, encouraged them. People are loving going out again. So this is something fun, something to think about. The other piece of this is smaller group experiences, whether that's Sunday school, whether that's life groups, small groups, community groups, whatever it is you call them. When there's smaller groups and there's pods of people, where are we pouring into couples? How are we getting those couples content? And that's the great thing about small groups, is when you're thinking about talking to a pastor about, hey, we want to partner with you to pour into marriages, one of the things you can remember is this is the context. Smaller group experiences is the context that they will not have to recreate. You just say, hey, you guys are already meeting on Sunday mornings, or have life groups. How about you pour it into some content? We have some content to give you to pour into an existing context. I will say this, for us, our small group has meant everything to us during COVID. They've always meant everything to us, but we really kept each other, sane. We call each other the kibbutz. These are our dearest friends, our buddies. I mean, these are the people we choose to be our family. I'm just going to leave it there. But these are the people that poured in. We did some fun things over the time where, they dressed up. That's my wife in the middle. She put on her wedding dress. The other ones wore their veils and different things. We had kind of wedding night. Well, now we had Disney night at our house. Everybody just kind of dressed up in their Disney stuff. But there's something that you want people who are for marriages. Because here's a stat that I saw the other day. It's called divorce contagion. This is a study out of Harvard. Is people are 75% more likely to get divorced if you have a close friend who is also divorced. Now that, friends, is a depressing stat. But here's what I believe if people have this much influence on each other, if close relationships have this much influence on each other for the negative, couldn't it be safe to say that they have this much influence on each other toward the positive? That if you put people that are for each other's marriage, could it be that it has the same level of impact to make their marriages better, safer, richer? And even if you divide this in half, wouldn't it be worth it for us to say, we want to surround people with other people who are for their marriage? People need people who are for their marriage. How many times I say that? 10. I just can't emphasize that enough. The other piece of this is individual couples. Is that you want to pour into, how do you help couples when they're on their own? Which is the most of the time, how do you pour into individual couples? Here's a church out of Washington. This is our friend Sarah. And what they did is they had pizza night. And they created a pizza date, and they created just a fun little journey, and they cooked them all pizzas, and then they set them off and they said, hey, we're not going to do this here. You're going to go there and do it. You're going to hang out and go there, like to a park, or you're going to go back home and date. You're going to go to wherever you're going to go. You're going to hang out, and here's the pizza date to make that happen. Is we want to create resources and give them tools. There's so much great content out there, but what's really helpful for churches to do is begin to filter that for them, is that you find them and direct it. I remember walking into Barnes & Noble in 2001, as I first started marriage ministry, seeing at least 100 books and being overwhelmed. Well, imagine how overwhelmed people feel when they go on Amazon and look for a book. There's over 100,000 marriage books on there. They're overwhelmed. So we're not lacking content, we're lacking context and a filtering of that. We've created a marriage ministry kit to help you do things in large groups, small groups, and individual couples, to help you do all that stuff. We found that most churches don't have marriage ministry leaders. So we kind of said, hey, we'll be that for you. You can find the kit at thinkorange.com/marriage ministry kit. Just wanted to let you know about that resources. And let's just end here. The purpose of marriage is to be a reflection of Christ and the church. And I tell you, I think sometimes that we can forget that, right? Like I know we can forget, like, why are we doing this? Why are we pouring into couples? And it is that they reflect the love of Jesus. when you think about Ephesians 5, it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Like, I'm going to do that as my way of saying, God, thank you for the huge act of submission that you had for me. And that people, they may right now in the world have a problem with God, or they may have a problem with Jesus, but what they don't have a problem with is when they see relationships that are strong, when they see relationships that are living in this radical way that Jesus calls us to live. So with that in mind, just know that what you're doing is so important. I just want to encourage you to get strategic as you go in and help churches. The more you can empower them and say to them, hey, we're not here to add anything else to your plate. I think that's so key as you're going in, you're talking to these leaders, hey, we're not here to add anything to your plate. We know you've got so much going on. We're here to take something off your plate. We want to help you. We want to partner with you. We want to cheerlead with you. And I think also, as you're talking to them, can you let them know how this is adding to their vision and direction of the church, the vision and direction that they already have? Then that's a powerful thing. You're not off mission for them. You're helping them to accomplish their mission. And you just say, hey, listen, I don't need to add anything to play. I just need you to cheerlead, and that's it. So again, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for pouring into your city by pouring into marriages. I shared that study earlier on about what parents are looking for. When they look for support, only 4% of them says the church. So if we can change our messaging, if we can change our messaging that the church is actually here to support your marriage and support your family, when we change that messaging, that becomes really important. That we are community, we are here for you to serve your marriage. Again, thank you for doing what you do. I'm going to give it back to Carl and the team, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Wow, what a wonderful presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed Ted and his humor. And I think Ted is actually on a plane right now somewhere, or else he would have been here. But again, we're just so appreciative of him and his wisdom. So we'll go ahead and move on. And I know we're getting close to the hour. And so if you guys have to hop off, just remember that this is all recorded, and we are going to post it onto our Marriage Initiative YouTube website following the event. So next on our agenda, we have Carl Caton, and as most of us know, Carl is the president and founder of Marriage Initiative, and Carl is going to present on a guide document for online resources. So Carl.
Thank you, Katie. And yes, and we'll close it here really quickly. We are so excited about Ted Lowe and the incredible support system he has created for churches. And one of the things, all of you on this call, you're all city leaders. You're thinking about the city. But if you're trying to empower churches, if you're trying to help marriage ministries get started, you end up being in kind of a consulting role, right? Because you need to come into churches, you need to understand marriage ministry. I think all of you know how marriage ministry works and what are some of the best practices. We wanted you to hear from some people today who are kind of some of the best thinkers in that category, so that as you come alongside churches and help support them, that you are able to play that consultative role really well. So one of the things we want, as we're kind of closing out today, we've created the very first draft of a guide document. So there's a lot of resources out on the internet to help churches start marriage ministries. So what we're doing, this is the very first draft of this guide document. We're going to send this to you. It's a Word document, still in rough form, but there's 10 different resources that we're going to be able to provide to marriage ministries and churches to kind of support them as they're on their way. And what we did is we hired a writer to kind of look at the best resources out there, and really on the front end to synthesize what is out there to support churches in their marriage ministries. So we're going to start off in this guide document talking about that as you're developing a marriage ministry, there's really 8 things that you can do. 8 things you need to do strategically to start and to grow your marriage ministry. But at the same time, after we go over those 8 steps, there's 3 different types of resources which we believe can be really helpful to churches as they start marriage ministries. First is are other documents. There's some downloadable PDF documents. Focus on the Family has a document that's a PDF you can download, a very descriptive document on how you start a marriage ministry in a church. The ministry called AMFM has another PDF that you can download that again gives a lot of direction on how you can start a marriage ministry at a church. Family Life, the ministry Family Life has an amazing marriage ministry training conference that's been led by Mike Finley. There's a link to that video that you could hand off to churches. So there's a number of resources that can guide churches as they're taking next steps, and it gives them a choice of some different things in different formats to help them take that step. The next thing that is available are 3 really great books that you can hand off. The first is Ted Lowe's book called Married People. We have bought 200 copies of this book. We give this book to lay couples that are really passionate about marriage and want to start a marriage ministry in a church. And in this book, I mean, it's essentially from A to Z, everything that a lay couple needs to know to run a marriage ministry in a church. And another book that's just out is a book called Endgame. It's by J.P. DeGance and John Van App, and it gives a lot of the philosophy, kind of the real high level of why this is important in communities. If you would like a copy of these books, send Katie Ray an email. We'll mail you both of these books for free so that you can have a copy of them. But we think that's a great support resource that you can give to churches. And then the last thing that is available is are some what I call support systems. Coming back to Ted Lowe again, Ted Lowe has a marriage ministry strategy pack, which is a great support system for churches. And as you all know, almost everyone is familiar with Watermark and Reengage and how they provide a very comprehensive support service. So now this is your homework. We would like for you all to look at this document. Again, it's just draft 1. We're not going to print it until it's maybe the 3rd or 4th version. We would love for you to take a look at this. Give us feedback, give us ideas, give us ideas for how we can improve it. This is a document that we're all going to work on and create together. And so I hope that you'll take some time to look at this document. And then once we kind of craft collectively and collaboratively craft the content, then our graphic designer will make it, turn it into a beautiful document. We'll have it printed and available to you so that when you walk in a church and are playing a supportive role to help them start a marriage ministry, you'll be able to put something in their hand that can give them direction to what are the 10 best things out there on the internet that can be supportive to you as you're starting a marriage ministry. So we are so thankful for each of you and just the incredible talent and knowledge and expertise you bring to this, and are excited to collaborate with you together on it. So Katie, it's back to you. It's 1:03. We almost made it right on the money.
Well, thank you, Carl, and thank you all again for joining us here today. And a big thank you, of course, to all of our guest speakers. And as always, if there is any way that Marriage Initiative can help come alongside you and support you and your community marriage initiative, please feel free to reach out to us. I've just put my email in the text box there, and you can always respond to me directly via email once I send out a link to our recording following this event. Lastly, we did want to end with a Q&A session for anyone that had questions for our speakers today. And I know that Ted, his was a recording, and I believe Dennis had to hop off as well. But we do have Carl, and I believe the Beldens will be able to stick around as well. And of course, we understand it's the middle of a work day, so if you are not able to stay, the Q&A session is recorded as well. So if you're not sticking around, I hope to see you guys next time, and I hope that you have a blessed weekend. Have a good one. Bye-bye. And for those of us who are sticking around, and if you do have questions, what we will probably do is if you could just raise your hand virtually. I think there's a little, you can raise it physically like Mark is doing, or there should be a little hand that you can virtually raise. Yes, I see that Lowe and some of the others have found that. So I will go around the room and hopefully we can get to everyone. So we will start with Lawayne. If you want to go ahead and ask your question, you have the floor.
Yes, first of all, good afternoon and happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Or, well, Sunday will be Father's Day, but just happy early Father's Day. As we know, every day is Father's Day. And so we're just thankful for that, for all the fathers out there, biological fathers, fathers that are spiritual fathers. So there's all types of fathers out there. So we really appreciate that. So my question is, what are, what is some of the responses that you've heard, the feedback that you've heard from churches, when you're presenting this information like Ted Lowe, and things like that? Because I know that, churches, they really, in their heart, they want to help with marriages and they know it's important, and they also don't have the time to do it, but are they able or, willing to really respond to it, like in a way, and say, okay, yes, I'm ready to do this. And yeah, so yeah, basically what is the feedback or what are some of the responses that you're getting from that?
Well, I'll be happy to jump into that. One of the things we loved about Dave and Cheryl Belden being with us is that they have been so great at solving an immediate problem. And, so that they get a call from a pastor struggling because they have a couple that's in a really difficult place, and their ministry comes alongside this church and solves this immediate problem, and the way they do it is a way that's sustainable. In other words, and Dave and Cheryl, you guys speak into this, but you do it by training some mentor couples, and that takes some of the load off the pastor, so you get immediate results. And I love that's why we wanted to present them today, is you get immediate results. But those couples stick around, hopefully, and as they stick around, then you coach those mentors on how to begin building a team and begin growing the marriage ministry, because you're developing a track record, supporting your pastor. It's a long game. You have to really approach this. This is a long game, and we feel like in 3 to 5 years you can get a marriage ministry underway, and in 10 years it's running really great. But we know lay couples. We have a couple of lay couples in San Antonio. Both of these couples have been running marriage ministries in their churches for over 44 years. One of the couples now 46 years. Isn't that amazing? But they've earned that right because they were steady, consistent, and always supportive to the church. Dave and Cheryl, sorry, Dave and Cheryl, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I just totally agree. It really is the long term. It's the relationship that we've built with the churches, to come in and not expect anything from them. This is how we can help. We just want to be there for help. And then when down the road, when they need something, they feel real comfortable in calling us. So yeah, it's long term.
And I know Kim Kwame, Kim, you weren't expecting me to call your name, but Kim, you've done a great job of being supportive to churches in the Pacific Northwest, and you all have been there for them and given them a lot of guidance and encouragement. You've brought leaders together in your region, and I just want to celebrate, what you've done. You've built a great network of people in your part of the world.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be on a call like this, right? To hear what God is doing similarly in other places, right, around the United States. It's so encouraging. You mentioned AM/FM, and we went to 2 of those conferences when they had them and learned so much. And so it is good. And we model what we've done at our church here at Lighthouse after the Married People book. We've read that. And so it is a great resource. So I'm excited.
Kim, again, I'm putting you on the spot, but you all also have done a really good job of what y'all have organized a lot of date night events. And then through those date night events, you've met couples who had a passion for marriage, didn't know where to begin. You came alongside them And those couples where you're introducing party, in other words, they built the relationship into the church. And I know you all have been able to help marriage ministry start because you started in a very organic way. And that was really well done.
Thank you, Carl. And I think one of the things we did was like invite people to come and participate. Say if we're putting on a date night event, we invited a possible leader from a different church, leader couple, to come and participate in our event. So they got to have fun and do it, but also learned how it was done, and then they could go back to their church and put their own on.
Well done. Well done. All right, back to you, Katie.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Lowe?
Yes, I just really wanted to find out the response because I know in Charlotte there's a ton of churches, and we know that out of like 1,000 churches, there's like maybe 3 to 4% that have marriage ministries. So, I know that there's a great need, but I just wonder about the response. There's a lot of other things that go on. They serve in the community. These churches do so much, but are they really highlighting and really putting marriage first? Or is this like a very, okay, great, it sounds good, but how are we actually doing it? So what's that response to doing it? And a response takes action. So what's the action? Are we, we doing it? Or are we just talking about it and just highlighting or putting a nice web page together or whatever? So, like I want to be a part of that change, and I want to know if there's resistance, and I understand it's a long game, but are we just creating dialogue, or are we actually taking action so that we can see change? Because marriage has been around for a long time. But divorces are really the highlight of Christians, just as well as it is for non-Christians. So that was kind of my question, where I was kind of leading to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll speak into that again. And one of the things that I'm always reminded of is humans are herd animals. Humans take social cues from each other, and as churches step up, and Lowe, what you're saying is absolutely right, and I think that's consistent in every city in the country. Very small number of churches have established marriage ministries, but as churches begin to get more intentional, and as they watch each other getting more intentional, it encourages people to follow suit. We capture vision from each other. And one of the things we've done in San Antonio is we've created a support system for churches so that they can be successful in leading marriage ministries. And one of the ways we did that was to create a support system for Reengage. We had 2 churches in San Antonio that were doing Reengage. We invited staff members from 25 churches to come together and explore what Reengage is. And we went from 2 to 12. And so on 300 nights of the year now, there's a Reengage group going somewhere in the city. And that's a remarkable thing. And so again, people capture vision from each other. They follow suit. Lay couples in one church say, why are we not doing marriage ministry? Because we've been going over to the church across the city, and they've got great date night events. Why are we not doing that? We had 187 live events for marriages in San Antonio in 2019, because people all across the city were stepping up and watching others and watching them be successful and following suit.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carl. And thank you for your question, Lowe. Okay, next, Ian, do you have a question for the group?
Not so much a question, but I did want to thank Carl, and I figured this could kind of tie into what Lowe was asking. So our last meeting, Carl had said, you know what, when we talk to churches, asking them, hey, what are the biggest challenges your church is facing? And what are the biggest challenges that you've had with couples? And I really took that to heart and started employing that as I visit various churches to say, hey, we're looking to come alongside. So those are the first 2 questions I ask now. What the biggest challenges their church is facing, what the couples in their churches are facing. And people are very free to share that but then that also helps guide the conversation into, hey, this is how we can come alongside to help with that. Let us take something off your plate. So I definitely wanted to thank Carl for that insight, because it's been extremely valuable here in Northeast Florida.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, people own what they help to create, so that's good. Katie, I noticed Mark Ellis has his hand raised, but can we allow him to ask a question?
I guess I was waiting. I was making him go last, but I think that he has the last one. So go ahead, Mark. We're just picking with you.
I just feel the love everywhere. My question is not for Carl. It's for Dave and Cheryl. You had mentioned classes and conferences, events, couples cafe, couples Olympics, preparing Rich, just different things that you are doing in the community. And I was wondering how that is distributed or presented. Surely you're not able to do all of that yourselves, but if you are, let us know how. And who is doing all of this work? I think this is our vision, but we're in a situation where we're having to train a lot of churches and identify leaders within a church, not asking a pastor to do it or even a staff member. Hopefully that we get lay couples. So how are you going about that?
Well, that's a great question. We do most of it. It's interesting being part of this group is we have felt pretty good because we've reached hundreds of, 100 people, couples every year. It's so fun to hear what Sammy's doing because they're reaching thousands. And part of it is we can't do it on our own, or we're only going to reach, fewer people. So we have to do a better job of getting people to come alongside us. And Sammy's been really helpful in getting us to do that. But really the couples cafe, I think someone already shared, you do one of those and you bring someone else along to see it, and they can do it in their church also. Their couples love to get together. They love to be together. And so when they see that, it encourages other churches to do the same thing. And we think the Olympic thing would be the same thing. Once one couple got to do it, they'd want to bring it to their church. And we don't have to have, we can support that. We don't have to be there for that. We can give them the ideas. We can show them that. When it started to hit pretty big is when COVID hit. So that's kind of thrown some of that stuff off, but we hope to get back to that. Again, the date nights and all that stuff, the church just needs to see what that looks like. It's not that difficult, and couples love it. So
how are you? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, when we do go out, and talk with a pastor, a lot of times we'll meet a couple in our Marriage Works class and they'll say, you need to come to our church. And we're like, okay, that's fine, but you need to get us a meeting with your pastor, and so then they'll come and we'll meet with the pastor, and then maybe we'll get a Marriage Works class started. And then out of that Marriage Works class, the couples that come hopefully are a lay couple who's interested in marriage ministry. And so we'll begin to train them. We'll do Prepare and Rich with them. And then we'll train them to do that with other couples. And, we just start little like that in a church.
So, I think the thing we've done well is date nights in our own church. But how to get that exposed to another church, how are you accomplishing that so that other churches know about it and want to do it? One of the things we have done fairly successfully is we've put together a toolbox that is on, I'm not big at going and finding the thing to raise your hand and the other stuff where you put this stuff, but it's a Google Docs is where Michelle has put it. And she distributes that out to churches that want it. But how do you get that idea to where somebody else wants to do that since they're not coming to your church's date night?
That's the challenge. Yeah. I think like, they were saying, like Kim was saying too, trying to invite somebody to come, from another church so that they get excited about that. And then anybody that you do have, any churches that you do have a relationship with, that you're doing something with, talking to them about it. Even sometimes we'll say, we're going to come and do this for you, for that church one time. And then, hopefully they're going to carry that on.
I think part of it too is when we do our marriage work class, we're with couples for 6 weeks. And so we're building a relationship with that couple. And so for them to want, it's real common, or it's real easy for them to ask, can you come to our church? And so they're invested in us and we're in them. And so that helps us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good word. I think we don't have problems connecting with pastors because we live in Little Rock and I was the Little Rock Weekend Remember representative for a lot of years. So Michelle and I know a lot of pastors. However, what we're finding is pastors they're struggling post-COVID. So finding connection points with them to get to the point of marriage ministry. I think it was Ted maybe or Carl that said something about kind of the continuity of how they're feeling to start something new. And we just want to be there to assist them. So I'm interested in learning more about the marriage works. So I may connect with you offline here. And
that'd be great.
I like the idea about offering to go do a date night for a church. So we'll probably kick that around too. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And let's see, we have 2 more questions I think we'll have time for. Carlos in Chattanooga, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think Dave pretty much almost touched on it when he was talking. My question is, how important is the trust factor when you go into these different ministries? And does it matter if you're married and how your marriage is doing? Of course, we know that's the key, but how do they look at how long you've been married, the trust factor, and the what's about the average time? When do you see them kind of easing up on letting you come to their ministry to talk to their people, as far as, okay, you got a record here, we've heard a lot about you, or how am I making sense here? Do that?
Oh yeah, we totally get exactly what you're saying.
We even have a letter from our pastor, that we sometimes, if we're going to meet with somebody, we're going to send that on ahead, because our pastor's kind of well known here where we live. And we have our counselor too. He's been around Fresno. So sometimes you do have to say, hey, let them know who we are.
I think, again, that is a big challenge. One thing that we learned is that, pastors, rightly so, are protecting their flock. The struggle is they don't know us, so they don't know what we can do for them. So I think oftentimes, again, when a couple comes, like when our church does it, and another couple comes that goes to a different church, that person talks with their pastor. So that's where it gives us some credibility. And also, we come in to help. What we charge. We charge $60 for a couple for 6-week class. I mean, that really is next to nothing. And we tell the church, look, and if someone needs to be there, they don't need to pay. We'll be glad to do it for free for them. So again, it's building trust. It's building it. And once we get one class done, we're fine. They understand what it is, and we're okay. But it's a challenge, that first class.
Yeah. And then just like the couple that we've met from like another class that goes to their pastor, they're going to share like, this is what it's done for our marriage, to say, we think that this can make a difference in our church, just from what it's done in our marriage.
Yeah. And one last thing is the doctrinal issues. Is that a big thing? because we're trying to save marriages and we're supposed to be really from the same word of God. But the little we know we had those little technicalities with you, but y'all don't believe this and y'all don't believe that. So because y'all don't, so we just throw everything out. So is that a big issue where you are located?
Fortunately, that has not been a big issue. Our book that we do have, every skill has a verse that we're using where that skill comes from, and they're not controversial. It's straight what Scripture says, and we don't argue about that. And we don't get into some areas like that. It just hasn't happened. So for us anyway.
And we give them our curriculum, we give them our workbook before we go in so they can see what we're going to teach. I mean, they don't always know what we're going to say, because we could say something, but they do see what we're going to teach.
My apologies, I was on mute. Okay, Rosalind, did you have a question for us?
Yes, am I off mute?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, hello everybody. I am Rosalind Hickman from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Executive Director of Covenant Keepers Marriage Ministry here for over 17 years. Just wanted to acknowledge whoever was asking me. I couldn't get back. I didn't know how to find my chat button here on my phone, and he wanted to know where I was calling from. So it is Chattanooga. But I did want to reach out to, was it Lawayne who asked the question earlier about the busyness of pastors and how do you get feedback and things like that? Was it Lawayne?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, definitely Lawayne would love to talk to you and talk to you about the success that we've had for years here in Chattanooga with that, knowing that most of the African-American pastors, and now we even have non-African-American pastors on board, but they are usually not full-time. They're bivocational, and I hear you when you say they're busy, they have a church calendar, and marriage ministry may or may not be at the top, but there are ways to involve them, and we've had just great success here in Chattanooga. Would love to share our booklet with you, how to get a marriage ministry started, and even with you all if you're interested. But we were listening today, Carlos and I, to kind of see what may be happening in other places, and it sounds like all of us are doing some of the same things. We may have a little bit more opportunities here because we are not, trying to work with people across the country. We work usually in our area. We just feel like God is calling the body of Christ together to share, and would love to share how we work with pastors, couples, and all about how it's working here in Chattanooga. If you're interested, you can visit our website. We spoke to Katie a few weeks ago and gave her a little overview working with Family Life here in Chattanooga, have served on their Weekend to Remember team. But let's talk because I think we could kind of answer that question with you even more in more detail if you're open to that.
Yeah, definitely. I am open for sure. So send out your email and we can all connect. As part of the issue is that we work in silos, so well. So, my goal is for everyone to come alongside each other and, just be a web, and so we can cast a net all together. So,
Yeah.
great. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rosalind and Lawayne, I can connect you guys via email following the call, if that's okay with both of you. That way y'all can have each other's email address and communicate that way.
Thank you so
Sounds
much.
good.
That would be excellent.
And then I think the last person who has a question today is Mr. Logan Kelly.
Hey, it's not a question, it's a comment to Mark to talk about, spreading the vision throughout the city. And I think that's something that we've done well. And granted, we're in Panama City, we're part of Live the Life Northwest Florida. And like a lot of you, we struggle to get churches. It's a marriage ministry desert over here. We're in the worst area of Florida to be married. We have 4 of the top 7 counties for divorce. But what we found is we do a lot of extensive advertising. What Carl said is true. And I like to say people are sheep. We're all just God's sheep, right? And so your sheep on their own are gonna be directionless, but if you show them a direction, they'll take it. So all the advertising that we've done has pointed people to something that's going on in the city. And so the bigger churches are going, well, we need to be doing something. So I found that when we start advertising, and we poured thousands and thousands in the last couple of years, as part of our national marriage grant, when we started doing that, we've seen other churches that we don't even really work with start getting more in the way of marriage going. So yeah, it's we're all big copycats.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that that's on our agenda that we're going to do with some of the grant money. Once we set up some things, we're still working on our website, connecting it with social media and so on. So that's a good word. And I think you're right. I think that will connect some things. I don't know if you remember or not, but we sat at the same table.
Yes, at the ring. Yeah. Watermark. Yeah. I remember that last time. Yeah. Awesome.
Wonderful. I think we have answered all of the questions. Is there any other questions or comments anyone would like to make before we sign off today? No? Well, as I had mentioned, we will send a follow-up email with Carl's guide documents, the links to all the different things we talked about today, married people and NARMI, as well as Dennis Stoica's presentation as well. Thank you guys again for joining us today. It is so wonderful to see everyone and really to see you guys, get to know one another and learn from one another. It's just such a joy to witness. So thank you guys again. We hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you all here back next month.